สปีกเกอร์ท่านต่อไปนะคะซึ่งถือว่าเป็นท่านสุดท้ายของวันนี้แล้วนะคะจะเป็นคนที่พูดถึงเรื่องของเกมหนึ่งนะคะหรืออาจจะเรียกว่าเป็นแอปพลิเคชันหนึ่งที่วันนี้ทุกคนบันเชื่อว่าคงมารอฟังผู้ชายคนนี้พูดอยู่เหมือนกันนะคะเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของ POKÉMON GO นั่นเองนะคะซึ่งบริษัท Niantic Labs เนี่ยนะคะถือว่าเป็นบริษัทที่พัฒนาเกมเนี่ยมามากมายโดยที่ไม่ได้เอาเกมเนี่ยให้มันหยุดอยู่แค่เป็นเกมหรือเป็นโลกแห่งจินตนาการอีกต่อไปนะคะในเมื่อเกมเนี่ยมันเริ่มเข้ามาอยู่ในใกล้ตัวเรามากขึ้นใกล้กับชีวิตประจำวันของเรามากขึ้นนะคะทำให้ทุกคนเนี่ยเรียกว่าไม่สนใจสิ่งรอบข้างแล้วก็หันมาติดเกมกันงอมแงมเลยไม่ว่าจะเป็นผู้ใหญ่หรือว่าเด็กก็ตามนะคะยังไงวันนี้นะคะขอทุกคนขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับคุณเดนนิสฮวง Art Director จากบริษัท Niantic Labs ค่ะ
Hello, my name is Dennis Hwang. I'm from San Francisco. I'm the Director of Interaction and Visual Design at Niantic. First of all, thank you so much for having me at this difficult time for the kingdom, so my deepest condolences. So today I wanted to talk about lots of things. Pokemon Go has kept our company very busy for the last 2-3 months. Yeah, I guess we only launched in July. It feels like it's been forever. But it's been really interesting. We've had over 500 million downloads, which exceeded all our expectations. If you added up all the kilometers that players have walked collectively, it adds up to 4.6 billion kilometers. It's something like going from Earth to Pluto or something like that. And we've launched so far over in 130 countries. And we're not done yet. We still have quite a few countries to go. So we're continuing to expand, and we're now focusing on working on new features and rolling out additional fun things to do. So given this kind of success, I think I wanted to talk to you about Niantic and our mission and how we got here. So before going into more detail about Pokemon Go, I wanted to just briefly explain the history of Niantic. So Niantic Labs was founded within Google. We were kind of veteran Googlers, from all divisions. I personally worked at Google for 15 years as part of the webmaster team. So I always was interested in the intersection of tech and art. We became an independent company just last year. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary of spinning out. So we received funding from investors like Google, the Pokemon Company, and Nintendo. So now we're a fully separate entity. So Niantic is closely associated with AR or augmented reality technology. But I think it's first useful to look at the full space and talk about VR. Outside this convention hall, I noticed that you guys had a really interesting VR demo. So VR has obviously a lot of compelling things going for it. It's so immersive. It can transform your environment. It can teleport you to anything that the imagination can create. And I think there's a lot of momentum behind VR right now. Everyone from Sony to HTC, Vive, and Oculus, they're rolling out new hardware all the time. But VR also has the other side that's also interesting to look at. It necessarily puts a barrier between the human and between the person. So there's a screen, there's a camera, there's a microphone. And it's also almost necessarily sedentary. You're usually strapping some device on your head, and you can move about a little bit, but usually it's confined to like a room-sized environment for VR. AR, on the other hand, has been described a lot in fiction. The screen here is a scene from Iron Man. So Hollywood has kind of planted this idea of what augmented reality might look and feel like. And here, this is a screenshot from a company called Magic Leap that is more secretively working on augmented reality, some sort of hardware. But AR hardware is more about enhancing your everyday life. So augmented reality is more about taking what's going on around your everyday life and it's enhancing that experience. So on the screen, you're seeing the Microsoft's HoloLens on the bottom and some other form factors of AR. So AR is actually, the core of the idea anyway is quite familiar to us even today. If you think about how you use your mobile phone, a lot of times we're asking ourselves, where am I going? How do I get there? So a lot of the maps applications that all of you are familiar with is a form of an AR experience. It's kind of overlaying a layer of information on top of your everyday life, and it's telling you where to go, when you'll get there. So it's extremely useful and compelling. In the near future, that kind of simple like mobile device kind of experience will evolve, and it'll be like heads-up display on a car dashboard. This helmet that I think BMW is working on will really seamlessly kind of integrate that layer of information over what you're seeing. So Niantic, we like to think of augmented reality's definition as this. It's a style of computing that provides user benefit by enhancing our experience with the real world in situ. So by in situ, what we mean is that it's as the experience is happening, the information is enhancing those experiences, not something before or after. So looking at AR and VR, some market researchers are noting that the potential for AR market is much larger, and these data were pulled from before Pokemon Go's launch. So I would imagine that a lot more attention is now being put on augmented reality. So it has a lot of potential. So back to Niantic. So Niantic was founded by John Hanke. He used to, he had a hand in creating a company called Keyhole, which Google bought, and it became Google Earth and Google Maps division. And so John, for decades, for a couple of decades, he's been working on kind of maps and real-world data. And he has 3 small children, and I'm sure a lot of the parents in the audience can relate. He was struggling with screen time and children, with tablets and phones and computer screens. How do you pull kids away from these digital devices? And oftentimes we would see parents and children at a beautiful mountainside or a beautiful beach, and they're all missing the moment because they all have their phones and they're checking email. I mean, we've all done that too. So one of Niantic's core mission was to try to come up with something, and that something might be using these supercomputers that are in our pockets, like the smartphone, and try to just see what can we do to make people connect to their local surroundings more. So our first experiment was this little app called Field Trip, and I'll play the quick trailer to give you a sense of what we were aiming for. So this was our first kind of AR experiment. The app is still available, although we haven't worked on it for a few years. It was always on, so the app was constantly running, and it would pop these notification cards over the lock screen, and there would be voice dictation of the content of the location that's near you. So imagine walking through a street of San Francisco, and you come upon this really interesting building that's right up ahead, and you might wonder, that looks really interesting. I wonder what building that is. And right at that moment, your phone would buzz, and it would tell you exactly what that building in front of you is. And it would say, that is the oldest building in San Francisco. It was a Mission Dolores building, and it would kind of give you a blurb about the history and the background of that building. So this is the same field trip card that you will see around here. So the screenshot on the left shows you the map and all these cards below it, and you can browse through the different information that's nearby. And the BitTech building, the history and the information about it is all contained in the card. So the question is, how do we get all this information? So we partnered with people who have that information, which are book publishers, people who write about art and architecture and history. We partnered with shops big and small, travel guide companies, magazines, food reviewers. So it took some effort, but we had hundreds and hundreds of partners that had all this great content that was sort of trapped inside books or more static forms of media. So we basically took that information, scanned it, indexed it, and exposed it through this mobile app. So I think it was a solid attempt, but we had some challenges with Field Trip. The biggest one is, I think, interrupting somebody is a tough problem to solve with current generation hardware. So until we have something like a smartwatch or some goggles, like a more advanced version of Google Glass, for example, I think interrupting somebody with that information is a tough usability problem to solve. So after Field Trip and seeing the potential of what that magical moment could feel like, we kind of looked at it as Field Trip sort of as kind of an exploring kind of mode, right? You're kind of going to a city and you're learning all these new cool things about the city. But we wanted something more, I guess, compelling in the sense that it's more motivating to actually go out. And so we decided to look at game dynamics and what mobile games can provide as that hook. And that's where this game called Ingress comes from.
What was the net effect of the Niantic project? We had crossed a threshold in which global security could be at risk. Decrypting the data was the mistake.
This is not psychosis or some cognitive break, but an actual takeover of the mind.
Much of the public sculpture found in our cities is based on design seeded in the human mind.
Certain places have an energy that not only attracts people, but attracts events.
The mission of 13 Magnus is to monitor the effects of mind hacking. Obviously, this will be done with the highest of security, to make sure that the ideas do not contaminate or threaten humanity.
This all leads to Niantic.
I know that many tools will be needed to fight this battle.
You just have to know where to look and know what you're seeing.
Portals emit exotic matter into our world, and that matter has certain effects on our world.
I started noticing that there were energy fields, anomalies on Earth all around me.
A few of them exhibit properties that are as yet unexplained.
I know that there are others out there.
What if they're already among us, but we don't realize it?
And I must be prepared to work with them or fight them. They are coming. Something's wrong out there in the world. This doesn't feel like a scientific study.
The one hope lies in understanding what happened at Niantic.
Not all mysteries are solvable, but the joy comes in the pursuit.
So Ingress was our second project. It launched a few years ago and is still going on quite strong. So we went from this happy, like, oh, discover your own childhood kind of happy thing to this like secret government conspiracy battle raging under the table, that kind of switch. But this is a kind of another grand experiment. We took data from all around the world of notable places and art, public art and public art sculptures, murals, historical sites. And so here you have the Eiffel Tower. And we turned the locations, the real world locations, into a game piece. So in Ingress, you have to move. That's one of the core things that we stuck to. So in order to take any game action, you have to move and collect these bright dots on the left. The ground around the world is populated with these bright globs of energy. And in order to take any sort of game action, you must first collect this energy. And then people do lots of things in this game. You link these locations together and you try to capture territory and their scoring. But it gets quite intricate and complicated. But the core thing to remember here is that our players, even right now, are waging this kind of secret battle in a virtual augmented reality universe. And there's the blue team, which is the resistance, and the green team, which is the enlightened. And there are actually quite a few players in Thailand as well. I'm curious, have any of you heard of Ingress before? Do you want to raise your hand? Okay, some audience members are secret agents in this game. So initially when we launched Ingress, we had a simple goal. We were like, okay, if we can change one person's kind of commute, like their daily routine, in a way such that instead of just going from home to work and straight back, if we can like make them walk a little bit extra, wouldn't that be great? And when we launched, we started seeing social posts like this. So on the left, going work to normally, And then on the right, you see going to work while playing Ingress. And you can see that the person's GPS route is now suddenly much more complicated, and they're going through a public park. So we got pretty excited about this. And another thing is, after launching the beta, we weren't even fully publicly launched yet. These are the faction symbols, by the way, for the blue team and the green team. We started seeing tattoos of these game symbols on people's bodies. And I know this is a real tattoo because we ended up hiring this lovely lady. And I saw the tattoo on her arm, and it's real. So imagine Paul and myself, the two designers at Niantic at the time, seeing this photo and just panicking because we were in beta, we had just launched, and we thought we would like redesign things and kind of make the icons better. But as people were getting tattoos of it on the body, so we were never again able to change the icon again. So we've had already over 15 million downloads for Ingress, and it's being played in over 200 countries, and just really all over the world. And the collective walk distance, this is a few months old data, but at the time it was 258 million kilometers total distance walked. And we also started to see another interesting phenomenon. So as players were going to these real world locations to interact for the game, just naturally people started meeting each other. So these kind of social ripple effects started to happen, and Niantic decided to take advantage of that, and we started kind of holding these game events. We put some fiction behind it and said, hey, on this day, gather in Moscow, and there'll be this kind of operation that will determine the fate of the fiction behind this game. So it's kind of a very interactive, very participatory thing. And this is just one example. We have lots of events around the world every quarter. And there's one happening actually just next month in November. So another aspect of Ingress is just the sheer activity just around the world. And this map is actually showing right here. This is the PITEC Conference Center in Bangkok, and I captured this screenshot just yesterday. So every bright dot on the map represents a real-world location, and some team members have gone there. They've taken certain game actions to capture it for their teams. So that's why some dots are blue and some dots are green. So yeah, right under our very nose, it's happening all around us. So there's been some interesting data that we collected about Ingress. We learned that of all the players, over 91% of these players made genuine new friends, and 33% of the players have made 20 or more new friends, 15% making 50 more friends. So, in this day and age where, I don't know, I find it somewhat hard to make new friends, but through kind of social activities like this, it just kind of provides that excuse where you start kind of seeing familiar faces, get to know one another, and next thing you know, you're kind of having a great time together. And over 30% of the players have dated someone that they met while playing the game. And actually, the photo you see here is a couple that got engaged on a huge stage in Japan. And so when you get married, you have babies, and we've had quite a few Ingress babies so far, so really cute, kind of unexpected effect of our project. And in terms of exploration, there's been quite a bit of like a tourism angle to this. Because of our game having these events and these social interactions happening with members all around the world, 90% of the players have traveled to another city to play the game. 35% have traveled to 10 or more cities, and 5% have traveled to more than 50 cities. So it really gets you moving, and it widens your kind of social network. And in terms of moving, 47% have traveled more than 100 kilometers for ingress, and 15% have traveled more than 1,000 kilometers. And you can see this photo from, I think it was Norway. The map shows the route that they took for playing this game. In terms of more exploration-related data, so 19% of the players have taken an airplane trip for ingress, and 19% have also traveled to another country. So I don't know about you, but it was initially really hard for us to imagine that anybody would travel that much for a game. Yet here we are. We have hundreds of thousands of players who are doing this. And 9% of players said they've traveled to another continent, so they're traveling quite far distances. And 17% of the players have said that they've spent more than $1,000 playing Ingress. And usually those costs is like travel costs or battery packs, lots of gear that gives them a slight edge to playing. But it's more of, it's turned into sort of a lifestyle. If you can imagine Pokemon Go having events like this in the future, you know, the scale in which we're talking about is potentially much greater than the player scale of Ingress. And of course, there's a fitness angle. 60% of the players reported losing weight, and some people have lost significant weight playing Ingress because, you know, again, we require you to move. And there are funny things like this where we partnered up with a tour company in Japan, and they basically took a huge bus and kind of ripped the inside out and put game content inside the bus. And now these buses are running long distance trips all over Japan while players pay a premium ticket price to sit inside the bus and consume the game content while they're going from one city to another. So again, there's an interesting tourism angle here that might be relevant for Thailand. So our business model is pretty interesting. We ran this test for counting what kind of transactions we can generate by having players visit a game location. So imagine a convenience store in the middle of Bangkok, and let's say that we turned that store into a game place that players have to go to do stuff. So the question was, do people actually buy things? And the question, I think, was, the answer, I think, was yes. So the blue graph shows the total game actions. So that's kind of any time people have interacted with the game location, we track that. And then the red line was the total number of users. And this was a very small, limited test, so that's why the number of users is pretty constant and low. But the gray line shows the total redemptions, and we track the redemption by printing little codes on the receipt. So when players actually made a purchase, they got a little code that they can then use to redeem virtual objects. So we were able to count how many players are actually going inside the store and actually making purchases. And you can see the gray line trending up. So over time, even though the player number remained constant, the number of transactions for that business went up. So if you take the number of people who are visiting the location and if you add that with the game actions, it basically translates into more brand loyalty and also more transactions for the business. It's kind of a simple concept. So with Ingress, we learned that AR games can really alter kind of real human behavior. So we were, through this virtual layer that we put on, this alternate reality that we put over the world as a mobile app, we were able to create this real world lifestyle where thousands of people are moving from one place to another, making new friends, having fun. And the social connections that were made were real. It was real enough that they would get married, have children, have lifelong friendship. And exploring your local surrounding was also another magical experience. Like, people tell us all the time that while playing Ingress, they discovered a new small statue that was there all along, but they never knew while living there for years and years. And that point is significant, I think, because the more you kind of get to know your local surroundings, the more you care about it. And the more you care about your local surroundings, the more it's likely to lead to actions that benefit everybody around you. And finally, there's the exercise angle. People just simply got more physical exercise. And that, is tied to all sorts of benefits. So from Ingress, we kind of took another look at what can we do with this really solid footing. And I don't know if you remember from 2014, but while we were at Google, we held this April Fool's joke. And so on April 1st, a lot of companies kind of do silly things to fool their users. And Google's idea at the time was to convert their Maps app and the Maps product into a mini kind of a Pokemon hunt. So the idea was you had to look around the world and go around collecting these Pokemon. And at the time, it was just kind of a short-term project and we were going to move on from it, except that at Niantic, we looked at it and said, hey, this is kind of a really no-brainer kind of an idea. And so we talked to Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, and it actually turned out that the Pokemon Company's CEO was a very high-level, high-ranking Ingress agent. So he was a very avid fan of playing Ingress already. So he knew about us already. Even I think his wife was a high-level agent. So it was just a really smooth conversation that went really well. And so that's how Pokemon Go came to be. So our take on Pokemon Go was to take all the strengths of Ingress and try to make it more accessible. And I personally try to apply better usability for more heads-up gameplay when possible for when designing Pokemon Go. And so we knew we had a really fun and unique kind of, and also simple but fun app on our hands while we were building it. And we tried this fun kind of, take a picture, like have your camera and be able to kind of use the mobile phone's capability to really trigger kind of the augmented reality type experience with the app. But then this stuff started happening. soon after we launched, one person in San Francisco posted on Facebook, "Hey, let's go on a Pokemon Go crawl." And by that, they meant just kind of walking out together and going from bar to bar. And I don't know how many people that was, but it was just overwhelming just how many people showed up. And they were walking all around San Francisco, going from one business to another, and just having a kind of a really kind of a almost utopian experience where everybody in society, no matter what age you were, no matter what class you were part of, or your gender, none of that mattered. Everybody out on the street like that, they were just there because they enjoyed Pokemon. And you know, one person could just yell Pokemon on the street and everybody would respond, "Yay, I'm playing right now." So it was this really surprising aftermath of the launch. And the surprising part, I think, is captured well in this graph. So right when we launched, that orange line was our launch target kind of traffic level for the servers, for the computers that are powering Pokemon. The red line was our team's kind of best guess, worst case scenario. So we kind of took a huge multiple of our target goal and said, okay, if you know, way more people than we expect come in, it'll hit about this red line. That was our estimate. What actually ended up happening is shown in the green line. You can see that as time went on, the traffic just spiked. And for those of you who were playing Pokemon at the early few weeks, our servers were really struggling to keep up because just the demand to log in and the demand from the players were just overwhelming. So it was 50 times our target traffic. And in terms of surprises, as time went on, we started hearing about benefits of this Pokemon Go app that we created. Here's an example from the University of Michigan's health system. They're one of their children's hospital.
If I'm trying to get a kid to raise his arms up or to squat down, I can say, hey, the guy's a little bit lower, can you reach down and get him? And that's just a really tricky way that physical therapy or occupational therapy can get a kid to do the exercises that he was screaming and crying about 5 minutes ago that he didn't want to do. This kind of raises the general atmosphere of happiness here in the festival. It's a technology that's only going to get better and can be more exciting.
So the speaker before me asked the question, can a business success be coupled with social good? And we kind of started to see that. I think Niantic is actually one of the great examples of the answer being absolutely yes. We never expected the game to be used in such an environment where children in a hospital who are stuck inside, you know, going through physical therapy would be using Pokemon Go as means to cope and get treatment. Another set of surprises for us were all the kind of the mental illness and anxiety angle. So many people told us that Pokemon Go was this great tool that they were using to cope with social anxiety or helping with relationships, even autism. Families struggling with autism told us that for whatever reason, when their children were playing Pokemon, they were able to kind of interact and mingle with other kids in such a normal way. It was a really like an emotional kind of breakthrough for them. So I hope that these benefits are still ongoing. And just recently, I think just a couple weeks ago, Microsoft announced a research that stated that the Pokemon Go app, if sustained, could shave or could extend human life by 2.4 million days, I think. I'll have to look at the stats in my notes, but it was just going through the data that they saw using their fitness band and seeing how much physical activity that Pokemon Go had caused to go up globally. And if you just kind of do the math, it translated into that much greater life expectancy through the extra exercise. So what's next? For us, in the horizon, we have the Apple Watch integration happening. And so earlier when I was talking about the challenges of field trip, where interrupting somebody is a tough usability, tough UX problem to solve, these kind of smartwatches are kind of a really good solution for now, where the interruption is a lot milder. So you can just kind of, glance at your watch and go, oh, Pikachu is nearby, or let me get more items because the art mural next to me is actually a Pokestop, so I can press a button and get items from it. So these kind of devices that are kind of around us now, the wearables, the fitness trackers, all these Fitbits, things like that, are kind of turning into like a library of hardware for apps like ours, like for Pokemon Go and Ingress, to be integrated into and be a much more seamless experience for augmented reality. And this device on the right is what's called the Pokemon Go Plus. We launched it in September with partnering with Nintendo. So Nintendo manufactured these, fairly reasonably priced devices. It's just a simple kind of LED light and a kind of a vibration sensor embedded in it. And what you do is it basically prevents you, or it basically makes it so that you don't have to take out your phone when interacting with the Pokemon game. So it's another example of a really simple, just a blinking light, like kind of vibrating. That's just enough to make that connection between your local surrounding and the virtual layer be so compelling. It doesn't take that much to kind of make this all work. So I think in the future, it'll only get more exciting. And here's a picture that's really amazing to me. So just last July, we had what we call the Ingress Anomaly event. It's the game events for Ingress that I told you about earlier, where like over 10,000 people showed up for this one game event. So people from all over the world travel to Japan, and they have this kind of this game battle all day long. And then they go to this after party, and no matter what faction you're from, they just kind of join hands and celebrate together. So it's like this quite a party that we put on. And these are happening every quarter, which is amazing to me. And finally, I look forward to more tattoos. This picture is from a player of Pokemon Go who got one of the faction, the Team Mystic symbol tattooed. After what happened with Ingress, when my team was designing the symbols for the 3 teams in Pokemon Go, we knew that we knew the tattoo was a possibility, so we took care to make sure that they would look really good on the body. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. I think you better open another tattoo shops like all around the world. That would be great. And here, so let's move a little bit at the front. So we received 4 questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is that, where did you find the data of the players? For example, like the data about 30% of the Ingress players lose weight. How can you collect that kind of data?
We asked the players themselves, so we sent a survey out to existing Ingress players, and we aggregated the data.
So you always kind of like following all your players, right?
Yeah, so we weren't like tracking that information. We did a deliberate study, a survey for finding out the pulse of the information.
Okay, and the next question is, I think you already talked about that, but it said, what's your next step? I mean, like, what is your next step of your game industry? Not only for these 2 games, but what are you going to do in the future?
I can't say too much that's specific, but with the success of Pokemon Go, we have a lot of really great partners that are interested in working with us. So we're brainstorming currently at a company level. And we'll continue to work on Ingress and Pokemon Go to roll out new features. There are many more generations of Pokemon to go. We've only launched the first generation, which is the 150 Pokemon. But I think total there's over 750 to go. So there's a lot more to catch before you can be a true Pokemon master. And there's also the special like legendary characters that we haven't released yet. So there's quite a lot to do, and we're working hard to add more depth to the gameplay. We knew that the version that we launched, we wanted to keep it really simple and elegant, but it's only like 10% of the vision that we had for the product. So there's a lot of fun stuff that we're working on currently.
Okay, that's already answered the next question that they asked. How will you keep the players coming back to play the game as long as possible? So that probably answer that. So the last question is that this is very specific. They asked
Actually,
that.
I can add a little bit more to that.
Sure.
I think inherently what we're trying to do is to make these human experiences between people be richer, right? So it's not just that you're using this mobile app. It's that we're trying to use the mobile app in order for you to have interesting and meaningful interactions with your family, with your children, with the neighbor that you didn't know as well, but now you're like best buddies because you go on walks together playing Pokemon. My 70-plus-year-old mother is playing Pokemon, and so she comes to me for advice, which is really interesting. And my neighbors who are in their 60s are playing Pokemon. So it is really about the human connection. And I think the more features that we can add to help those social connections, I think that's what will keep people returning to Pokemon Go and other Niantic projects.
That's sure, because like for me, it's happened to me too. Like in my office, all the designers, they kind of like stop working at 6 to like find their Pokemon, and then they come back at 8 every day. So that's kind of create a human reaction. And the last question is that there are some parts some town in Netherlands, and they say that there are so many Pokemons, like very rare item in a specific place, and that make the neighbor, the people that is not playing that game, make them feel a little bit uncomfort about like people coming to this specific place. What do you think about this issue, and how would you solve this kind of problem?
Yeah, so Niantic is working really hard to try to make sure that these experiences that we create are positive for everybody involved. So even the non-players who, are kind of, dealing with the activity, the increased activity of, we are sending a lot of people to public parks and public spaces that cities have created for those purposes, but it is a tough question. I think we're trying to work with municipalities and local governments and trying to find good solutions where there's like a balance. A lot of the cities that we talk to, they love the fact that people come to these parks and enjoy it together. So they're meant for that, but at the same time, it is a question of balance. Like you don't want to, have too many players coming and then leaving a lot of trash behind or something, or causing nuisance. So the goal, I think, will be to just try to keep working to find what that right balance is.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that would cover all the questions today. So anyway, we would like to thank you, Mr. Dennis Hwang from Niantic Labs again,